Hi, welcome back to the National Creative Stories once again, and we have Professor Ravi Shankar, who is going to share with us with his latest book, Dividend Groove, that's been published some time back, but yet is still in great demand. Dr. Ravi, please tell us more about this book that you have written, because there's tons of poets that nobody has even discovered, but yet now is becoming in great demand.
Yes, well, it had the good fortune of winning the National Poetry Review Prize, and so it was published in 2010, and it is being printed again. So I'm thankful for that. And the conception for the book, Deepening Groove, it came from a time that I spent at an artist colony outside of New Hampshire, in the woods, the McDowell Colony. So it's a prestigious place, and they provide space and time for you to work on your creative projects. And I started writing these poems inadvertently, really. I didn't intend to. I had no idea that it would create a book. But I started because I had come from the city. I went to a place that was in the woods. I started encountering animals and hearing sounds that I was unaccustomed to. And so anytime you're in this kind of new situation, it creates a lot of creative energy. And so I started writing a few of these poems, and I found that they were all very compact, kind of like the sonnet. The sonnet is a 14-line poem. I started writing 12-line poems. So there were 4 tercets, 4 3-line stanzas. And they had to do with a whole variety of artificial and natural phenomena. My only rule was that I had to personally encounter some animal or some object, and so I wrote poems about everything from a spider to a deer to alligator to a bulldozer to the sound of a waterfall. And what I found when I was writing these poems, and they all took the same form, was that rather than being about the things that I was describing, they were really about the act of human perception, and how when we see something, we alter what we see in some way, and how everything that we encounter has many layers of awareness that we first encounter it with our senses, but then it also may have some kind of illusion that it triggers in us, or a memory. And so I wanted to explore all of the different aspects of these things in a very small space, in these 12 lines. And I ended up writing 60 of these poems, all in the same form. I've included about 30 of them in Deepening Groove total. And then I they form the backbone of this book. And additionally, I included some poems of voyage and poems of art. But the primary group of poems are what I call post-pastorals, because they come very much out of the pastoral tradition. Someone like Wordsworth, of course, who wrote about being in nature, but these are contemporary poems. So it's not a romanticized view of nature, but it is grappling with the environment, both artificial, synthetic, as well as natural, in a very contemporary way. And so that forms the basis of the book.
And do give us at least 2 readings from that book, your favorite readings, because you know what, most of our viewers would like to know how good this wonderful book you have produced.
Sure, I'll read you the first poem of the book. Just so happens to be the first poem that I wrote in the series, and so I'll read this just to give you a sense. This is called Crossings. Between forest and field, a threshold, like stepping from a cathedral into the street. The quality of air alters, an eclipse lifts, boundlessness opens, earth itself retextured into weeds where woods once were. Even planes of motion shift from vertical navigation to horizontal quiescence. There's a standing invitation to lie back as sky's unpredictable theater proceeds. Suspended in this ephemeral moment, after leaving a forest, before entering a field, the nature of reality is revealed. I'll read one more from Deepening Groove. This one is called Fireflies, and there's a word in here from the Japanese hotaru, which is a word for a firefly, but also refers to a kind of love, kind of spiritual love. And in Japanese mythology, fireflies are seen as the souls of the dead, transmigrating. And so I thought that conjunction was really quite nice. And this comes from being out in the woods in New England when the complete dark, and then just being totally amazed by the sight of these fireflies. So, fireflies. Heavy drape beyond the slip-formed stone wall, laid 1/2, 2/1, and shimmed by thin fingers of granite. Night falls moonless in a bindweed field, stretching to a dark grove that flares light. Sudden, incessant, nitric, electric, sea-green bursts more frequently seen on an arcade screen. Signals a synchronous Morse code of mating, sent from lanterns rung in a rosette, enervated by neurons, souls of the dead in Japanese folklore, Hotaru. Actually, it's love. They only find each other in the dark. So, I mean, you can see that I'm interested both in the kind of scientific vocabulary as well as the mythological aspect. And, of course, when fireflies are blinking, it is a mating call. They're trying to find each other, and that's the way they communicate. And so I'm always hoping to bring all of those things together in that short little poem.
Now, you also have written and co-edited W. Norton's Language for a New Century, Contemporary Poetry from Asia, the Middle East and Beyond. And it has won a Pushcart Prize and is even been featured in the New York Times and appeared as a commentator on the BBC. Please tell us more, how did that happen?
Yes, sure. Well, this project, Language for a New Century, actually is the reason why I was here in Singapore the last time I was here, which was nearly 5 years ago when the book came out. We're actually celebrating the 5-year anniversary of this collection. And the project started in 2001, actually. I was just had finished graduate school. I was living in New York at the time. And I was asked by the Asian American Writers Workshop to help put together an anthology with the poet Tina Chang to celebrate their 10-year anniversary. And so we were working on this project, and we put together an anthology of poems, and it was published online, and people were really excited about it. And right when this was happening, 9/11 happened. And so, of course, we were living in New York, and we felt totally violated by what had happened. It was as if part of ourselves had been destroyed. And yet, the paradoxical thing, I think, was because we were both Asian, Tina's Chinese American, I'm Indian American, we also felt in the aftermath that the representations of the East that we were seeing in the media were not at all representative of the heritage that we knew. We felt that there was a kind of monodimensional and stereotyped vision of the East, that everyone from South Asia was rendered as a terrorist, and we felt like we wanted to do something, to give back to the city, but also to reclaim our identity. And so when we were discussing what we might do, we thought, well, we're poets ourselves, why don't we bring together the voices of poets from around the world? And we found a third editor, Natalie Handel, who's from the Middle East. She's Palestinian American. And so the three of us embarked on this project. And I must say, if I had known at the time that it would take us 7 years to put this book together, I don't know if I would have agreed to do it. But in its final incarnation, we've included about 450 poets from 61 different countries, writing in over 40 different languages. And the goal was, I think, to create a sense of our shared humanness, that people on the other side of the world have some of the same concerns and beliefs, even if they have different cultures and attitudes. And one of the things that I'm most excited about is that the book encompasses not just Asian poets, but poets from the diaspora, Asian American, Asian Canadian, and Asian Australian, as well as poets from Central Asia, places we may perhaps think of as Asian countries, Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan and Tajikistan and Afghanistan. And also we have included poets from territories that don't have national sovereignty. So we have poets from Tibet and from Kashmir and from Palestine and from Kurdistan, the Kurds being the largest ethnic population without without a country. And in putting together the book, we did something very unusual for Norton Anthology. I mean, Norton Anthologies usually are very canonical, and they usually progress in a couple of different ways. The poets are either arranged chronologically or alphabetically. But in this case, we managed to put all of the poems in 9 primary themes. All the poems constellate around these 9 themes having to do with such universal subjects as childhood or love or war. And we've only chosen to include 1 poem from each poet. It's a book of contemporary poetry, and so our cutoff date was post-1948. That was for us when the world transformed in so many different ways, the end of World War II, the creation of Israel, the separation of India and Pakistan. So many things happened. So we wanted it to be a contemporary anthology, and we solicited work from around the world. We have a number of Singaporean poets, for example. And we envisioned this almost like a global cocktail party. We think of all of these poets in a room together speaking to one another. And so the way the poems were ordered is also very important, how they converse with each other, how they rub up against each other. And the final thing I will say, which our agent, it was her idea to include at the beginning of each of these 9 sections a personal essay from one of the 3 editors. So each section is introduced by one of the 3 of us, and we talk about our own life and our connection to the poems that we're presenting. And so I think it makes it a very intimate experience. You're hearing from us, but then you're also discovering a lot of poets. I mean, many of the poets had never before been translated into English, so we had to commission translations, and we had to go in search of, poets who lived in the Himalayas or poets who lived in the outback, and we really read thousands of poems, literally, before we came to the final book. And so it's with great pleasure and pride that I'm able to hold the volume in our hand. Really think that it's something that Norton had never done before, and it presents a different view of what serious literature is. I mean, in the U.S., a lot of times we talk about the Western canon, and we don't really pay a lot of attention to what's happening in the East. And so our hope is that this book, in part, counters that and allows us to give these poets expression and an audience that they might not have found otherwise.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced in compiling all these wonderful writings into this wonderful volume? And we also notice about the book cover. What does it represent? Because you have a very unique book cover that's been designed. Did you actually choose the book cover?
Well, to take the second part of that question first, no, we had some input, but when you work with a big publishing house like Norton, they have the final say. So, though we provide a little bit of input, I think that we really like both the kind of abstract aspect of the tree branches, and then you have this figure who seems like it could be from the past century, and then but there's still something very modern about it, and so I think that cover kind of represents the mood of the book in some way. And the biggest challenge, I mean, we have so many challenges. I mean, it's a great testament to our friendship that the 3 of us, Natalie, Tina, and I, still speak, because we had a lot of arguments, and I was primarily responsible for South Asia, Tina for East Asia, and Natalie for the Middle East. And so we wanted to bring together the most important voices from each of these regions, but of course, in any book, you have a limited amount of pages. So there's a lot of negotiation that had to happen. Who do we leave in? Who do we leave out? In some cases, we found that the publishing conventions were quite different in different countries. One example that I think of is we had a poet from Afghanistan who, of course, when you publish a book like an anthology, you need to clear the permissions. You have to have permissions from all of the original publishers or the estate of the poet. Norton needs to have a signed permission form from each of these poets. And this particular poet where he lived, there was no such thing. He didn't understand the concept. And so we kept emailing him and writing him and saying, please, listen, you need to sign this form. We can't include your poem if we don't sign this form. And finally, he sent us an email and he said, I don't understand. I've given you permission to use my poem. I don't understand anything of what you mean of this permission form, but I swear on Allah that you can use my poem. And so we printed out the email and stapled it to the form, and we sent it on its way. So, that was a difficulty. And then the other difficulty I mentioned in terms of representation, when you take a country like India, India has 24 official languages, and each of these languages has its own distinctive literary tradition. So how are we to choose which poets represent a country as enormous and variegated as India? And in some cases we had to answer questions of ethnicity. I mean, does someone who's a fifth generation Asian American have more claim to being an Asian poet than someone who is European but who's lived in a country like Nepal all his life? These are the kind of questions we had to determine for ourselves. Who we include, who you don't. There's a running joke between people who have all put together anthologies, which is that at the end you always end up making more enemies than friends. And I think that that's true because a lot of times reviewers concentrate on who's left out. And I think that this anthology is a little different in that we never are attempted to be comprehensive. If anything, our hope is that when a reader picks up this book and is interested in these poets, he or she will go in search of that poet's work and will try to discover the new voices that are not included in this, perhaps to put together the second edition of the book. But those were certainly some of the challenges we had to navigate.
Now, you spoke about the second edition. Is there any future for it? Is it in the works right now?
Yes, it's something that we have spoken about, and we've spoken to Norton about. It primarily has to do with how well the book is doing, and it's done fine. But we would really like to see it be adopted in more classrooms because it's a very teachable text, and I think it can be used in political science as well as poetry as well as Asian studies. And so I think we're going to give it a little more time and then hopefully update it, because even in the 5 years that have passed, numerous other Asian poets have come to our attention, either new ones or ones that we somehow missed. I think all three of us would love to do a second edition of the book.
Now, would you give us a reading of at least three of your favorite, poets from this wonderful book?
Absolutely.
Because you mentioned that there's been done one from Middle East, one from Southeast Asia.
Oh yes.
And as well as one from Asia. So probably you could pick one of them.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, let me. Maybe I'll start just as a bonus poem while I'm thinking about who to give you. I'll give you my own poem because as editors, one of the good things is you can include one of your own poems in the book. So I'll start with my poem and then I'll give you three others. And I think this poem is apt because it is quite a autobiographical poem. I think I mentioned I grew up both in India and in the U.S. and I moved back and forth, and this poem is about that experience. A couple of things your viewers might know, since you're so close to Indian culture, but a bindi, of course, is what an Indian woman wears on her forehead, and a lungi is what an Indian man would wear tied around his waist. Very comfortable kind of clothing. And then finally an epiphyte. An epiphyte is a rootless plant, an air plant it's called. It literally grows on top of other plants like in a canopy of a rainforest. So this is my own poem. It's called Exile. There's nowhere else I'd rather not be than here. But here I am, nonetheless, dispossessed. Though not quite, because I never owned what's been taken from me, never have belonged in and to a place, a people, a common history. Even as a child when I was slurred in school, towelhead, dot boy, camel jockey, none of the abuse was precise. Only Sikhs wear turbans, widows and young girls bindis. Not one species of camel is indigenous to India. If, as Simone Weil writes, to be rooted is the most important and least recognized need of the human soul, behold, I am an epiphyte, I conjure sustenance from thin air, and the smell of both camphor and meatloaf equally repel me. I've worn a lungi pulled between my legs, done designer drugs while subwoofers throbbed, sipped masala chai steaming from a tin cup, driven a Dodge across the Verrazano in rush hour, and always to some degree felt extraneous, like a meteorite happened upon bingo night. This alien feeling, honed in aloneness to an edge, uses me to carve an appropriate mask each morning. I'm still unsure what effect it has on my soul. So that was my contribution, and that comes from the section called Parsed into Colors. Each of the sections has a very colorful name, title that's been taken from one of the lines in one of the poems from the section, and that section is about poems of identity. Let me give you another poem that I like quite a bit from an East Asian poet, actually a Korean-American poet. This is Kathy Park Hong, terrific Korean-American poet. And it actually is a poem in two voices. I will give you both voices, but if we had two people here, it might even be better to listen to it. And this poem is called The Ontology of Chang and Ang, the original Siamese twins. And people might remember Chang and Ang who were connected together. They were from Thailand, and they then became kind of a circus attraction and toured around the U.S. And so all of the biographical facts in this poem are actually true. Kathy Park Hong, Ontology of Chang and Ang, the original Siamese twins. Chang spoke. Ang paused. Chang threw a beach ball. Ang caught it. Chang told a white lie. Ang got caught for the lie. Chang forgot his first language. Ang picked up English. In letters, Chang referred to themselves as I, Ang as we. While proselytizing, the preacher asked Chang, "Do you know where you go after you die?" Chang said, "Yes, yes, up there." Thinking they didn't understand, he asked, "Do you know where I go after I die?" Ang said, "Yes, yes, down there." Chang married Adelaine. Ang married her sister Sally. Chang made love to his wife. Ang daydreamed about money, his Siam childhood, and roast beef. He tried not to get aroused. Chang checked his watch, scratched his head, and fidgeted. Ang made love to his wife. Chang became drunk, knocked Ang out with a whiskey bottle, and went carousing with his boys. Ang was unconscious. Chang proved Einstein's time dilation while hobbling around the town square from bar A to bar B. Ang was unconscious. Chang apologized. Ang grudgingly accepted. Chang paused. Ang spoke. Chang interrupted. "I am my own man." Ang echoed, "We are men, yes." Both broke their bondage with their pitchman, Mr. Coffin. Both owned land in North Carolina and 40 slaves. Both were nostalgic for Siam, childhood of preserving duck eggs, watching tiger and elephant fights with the king, Mother Knock, who loved them both equally. The physicians were surprised to find both were personable. Both did not appreciate the outhouse joke. Are all Orientals joined? Allow me to stick this very sharp pin in Ang's neck to see if both of you feel the pain. Is it true that you turn babies into cabbages? We are nice civilized people. We offer you bananas. Both were sick of fascination. Both played checkers, sired children, owned whips for their slaves, shot game, ate pie. Both wore French silk, smoked cigars, flirted, and believed in the tenets of individualism. Both listed these activities to the jury and cried, "See, we are American." Both were released with a $500 fine for assaulting another headhunter. Both were very self-aware. Both insisted on an iron casket so the grave robbers would not dig up their bodies and sell it to the highest bidder. Both did not converse with one another, except towards the end. "My lips are turning blue, Ang." Ang did not answer. "They want our bodies, Ang." Ang did not answer. "Ang, Ang, my lips are turning blue." Ang turned to his body and did not answer. So the other thing, I mean, this comes from a section called Slips in Atmospherics, which is one of my personal favorites because it has to do with avant-garde kinds of poems, poems that have been constructed in interesting ways. And a lot of times, I think, especially in America, there's a sense that innovation is solely the purview of the West. That it's only in America that you're finding avant-garde experiments and innovation, and of course that's not true. It's happening all around the world. And so in that section we look at poets that are stretching the bounds of language in some way, in some interesting way. The next poem I will share with you, I'll share just an excerpt of this one, because it's a bit longer, but it comes from an Iraqi poet, Sadi Youssef, again a literary giant, and I don't know how well known he is. Certainly in the U.S. he's not as well known as he should be, but he's one of the great Arabic poets, and also he's a translator of English authors into Arabic. He's Orwell's Arabic translator, for example. And this comes from a long poem of his. It's called America, America. And I think it's interesting, particularly in terms of what I said, the goal of the book was in this post-9/11 climate. So this is a song that's both, I think, a kind of love song for America, but also a song of some concern as well. And I'll just read from the middle. This is also a poem that's highly innovative. It includes snippets of the blues and all kinds of interesting aspects. But I'll just read a couple of sections right from the middle of this poem. Sadi Youssef, America, America. God save America, my home sweet home. I too love jeans and jazz and Treasure Island, and John Silver's parrot and the balconies of New Orleans. I love Mark Twain and the Mississippi steamboats and Abraham Lincoln's dogs. I love the fields of wheat and corn and the smell of Virginia tobacco. But I am not American. Is that enough for the phantom pilot to turn me back to the Stone Age? I need neither oil nor America herself, neither the elephant nor the donkey. Leave me, pilot. Leave my house roofed with palm fronds and this wooden bridge. I need neither your Golden Gate nor your skyscrapers. I need the village, not New York. Why did you come to me from your Nevada desert, soldier armed to the teeth? Why did you come all the way to distant Basra, where fish used to swim by our doorsteps? Pigs do not forage here. I only have these water buffaloes lazily chewing on water lilies. Leave me alone, soldier. Leave me my floating cane hut and my fishing spear. Leave me my migrating birds and the green plumes. Take your roaring iron birds and your tomahawk missiles. I am not your foe. I am the one who wades up to the knees in rice paddies. Leave me to my curse. I do not need your day of doom. God save America, my home sweet home. America, let's exchange gifts. Take your smuggled cigarettes and give us potatoes. Take James Bond's golden pistol and give us Marilyn Monroe's giggle. Take the heroin syringe under the tree and give us vaccines. Take your blueprints for model penitentiaries and give us village homes. Take the books of your missionaries and give us paper for poems with which to defame you. Take what you do not have and give us what we have. Take the stripes of your flag and give us the stars. Take the Afghani Mujahideen's beard and give us Walt Whitman's beard filled with butterflies. Take Saddam Hussein and give us Abraham Lincoln, or give us no one. So that's just a little excerpt from the middle of this poem. It goes on. It's really a South Asia for you. So just to give you a sense, and of course this is just scratching the surface. There's so many terrific poets here. It's difficult to even decide which poem to use to share with you, but hopefully some of you will find this book on your own. Maybe I will read, let's see, yes, there's a poem here called The Strategist. This is by the Indian poet Arundhati Subramaniam. And I'll share this one with you as well. Strategist. The trick to deal with a body under siege is to keep things moving, to be juggler at the moment when all the balls are up in the air, a whirling polka of asteroids and moons, to be metrician of the innards, calibrating the jostle and squelch of commerce in those places where blood meets feeling. Fear, chill in the joints, primal rheumatism, envy, The marrow igloos into windowlessness. Regret. Time stops in the throat, a piercing fishbone recollection of the sea. Rage. Old friend, ambassador to the world that I am. The trick is not to noun yourself into corners. Water the plants. Go for a walk. Inhabit the verb. And I'll leave you with that, I think, inhabiting the verb and being someone who acts. And that's our hope, that those people who encounter our book will inhabit the verb, in fact, and will act in a way that helps reveal the shared humanness that all of us have, whether we come from the West or from the East.
Now, moving forward, as the chairman of the Connecticut Young Writers Trust, could you share with our viewers how they can participate or even make donations to your wonderful trust itself?
Yes, that's great. This is one of the joys of being a professor. I'm a writer first and foremost, but I love teaching, and I think that the art of disseminating knowledge and helping people grow is a wonderful thing. And so the Connecticut Young Writers Trust has been in existence now. I think we're entering our 18th year, actually, and it's a program that's based in the state that I live in the U.S., in Connecticut, and it's meant specifically to foster youth literacy and creative expression. And so every year we have an annual competition. It's for high school age students, so anywhere from 13 to 18-year-olds all around the state submit entries in both poetry and in prose. And then we have a panel of very esteemed judges who take the work very seriously and every year determine a winner and second prize, and then we give these students scholarships. And so if anyone's interested, you can look at the website, ConnecticutYoungWritersTrust.org, and there you can find out more information. Also, you can make a tax-deductible donation, and all of the money that's donated goes directly towards helping these writers. And it seems like a small thing, but to validate someone in a creative field makes so much difference. And I think for all of us, we could use more sensitive individuals, and of course the youth are our future. And so I think it pays to invest in them, and I've been really honored to be associated with such an esteemed organization.
Now, what would be your criteria in your writings? What advice could you give for aspiring young writers in today's world? Because right now there's a lot of anxiety where many of the bookstores are closing down all around the world, and societies and governments and policymakers are trying to figure out how can they encourage people to read and write. So do you have any advice for that?
Yes, well, I think it does. It's something that we need to discuss and talk about, because as I mentioned, we're in this time of drastic change, and I think we're only in the beginning of what is going to transform fundamentally human consciousness and human society. And part of that has to do, I think, with a move away from reading and from literacy, which I find very disturbing, because I think it's paramount that we're able to engage with words and with language in order to better communicate. And so part of the advice I have, and one of the things, that maybe we'll get to this in a second with Drunken Boat when I talk about that, I think that rather than the anxiety that this climate presents, I think to turn the coin and look at the other side, well, anxiety for someone is opportunity for someone else, right? And so even though books seem to be imperiled, I think more and more publishers are starting to publish ebooks, and people are starting to access information through the internet, through their mobile devices. And so I think we need to shift our paradigm. While it's always important to publish books, I think I run an online literary journal I'll talk about in a second, and we have readers from all around the world who come to the site to both read literature, but also to view videos and look at art. And so I think one of the things about our moment is that we're becoming more and more collaborative as a species. And so I think there's great opportunities to work with graphic designers and with visual artists. If you work in film, they always need screenwriters. So I think that don't delimit yourself. But that being said, I also think that any aspiring writers would do well by reading the classics. I think that there's a reason, a lot of times what's in vogue or popular today is a trend that will eventually disappear. But when you read the work of Shakespeare or Tagore or Virgil, I mean, any of these classics, there's a reason why their work has persisted and lasted for so long. And I think that that kind of engagement with the past will only help develop the richness of the present moment. So I think reading as widely as possible, but then also supporting the literary arts. If you're an aspiring writer, subscribe to magazines, go to your local bookstore and buy books, go to readings and performances, tell your friends about the authors that you're excited about, share the excitement that you personally have. I think that's the only way, and I do find some positive strands. There was a very interesting essay by Octavio Paz years ago, and he described the situation, particularly about poetry, being one that's very paradoxical. And it's only been augmented today, I think. But he talked about a climate in which more books of poetry are being published than ever before, and less people reading it. So what does that say about us as a society? And I think that's true now. If you look around, because of the advent of the internet, there are more and more independent publishers. There are people starting e-zines and blogs, and there's a lot of venues to publish your work. But I would say it's not enough to simply be interested in publishing your own work. There's a certain narcissism in that and a certain navel-gazing. You also need to support the work of other writers. I think the two go hand in hand, that the more deeply you go into your own reading, the more fully you'll be able to embrace the potential in your own work.
Now, moving forward, what's next for you? What are you working on?
Well, so I am actually, speaking of transitions, I have just finished a book of poems. I'm kind of very slowly disseminating it out into the world. I'm in no hurry to get it out, but I actually have been working on prose. I've been writing a memoir. Actually, I've had some interesting few years, and so I'm writing about a wide variety of experiences, and I'm in the middle of working on this memoir. I continue to be the executive director of Drunken Boat, and maybe I can tell your viewers a little something about the magazine.
Well, yeah, sure. Please tell us more about your Drunken Boat, which is available online, and it's actually the oldest electronic journals of the arts.
That's right, yes. Drunken Boat, which you can see, drunkenboat.com, free to anyone with a connection to the internet, is in fact one of the world's oldest journals of the arts. It was founded in 1999, and so we're about to publish our 18th issue now. And I will say very quickly, I mean, I started this site just with a friend of mine who was a visual artist when I was finishing graduate school, and at the time I wasn't really publishing many poems, and he was a visual artist and he wasn't getting his work shown in galleries, and we were just, kind of frustrated. We're finishing graduate school and we didn't know what we were going to do, and I had purchased that URL, Drunken Boat. I was a big fan of Arthur Rimbaud, the French symbolist poet who wrote a famous poem called Le Bateau Ivre, the Drunken Boat. And I had bought this URL, and we decided, hey, why don't we just, post the work of our friends and people we admire. And I think what we didn't anticipate, I guess how could we, is because it existed on the internet, that word of the journal would spread far and wide. And so we published our first issue in 2000, and just didn't really think anything of it. It was just for us, but all of a sudden we started getting emails from people in Australia and England and China, and I don't know how they found out about the journal, but all of a sudden they said, hey, are you looking for work? We're interested in publishing with you. And so that was kind of how the magazine started. And the other thing is, because I founded it with a visual artist, we've always been very interested in work that uses the medium of the web as part of its compositional strategy. I don't think it's enough to just take something that exists in print and just migrate it wholesale onto the internet, because the internet is a fundamentally different medium, and it changes the way that you produce work and the way that the work is received. And so we wanted to use the internet to its full capability. And so in addition to publishing more traditional forms of representation like poetry and prose and translation, we also include works of art endemic to the medium of the web that could not exist in print. Things like video and sound art, digital animation, hypertext, web art, one of my favorite genres, which kind of brings together moving image and sound and interactivity. And when we publish poetry, for example, we often include audio of the poet reading that you can listen to. And so over the years, we've grown immensely. We have a staff now of about 30 individuals around the world. Our managing editor, actually, David Horton, lives in Beijing. And we also have published everyone from Norman Mailer, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author, to people being published for the very first time in the magazine. And I think our readership last year, we had nearly 500,000 unique visitors from around the world, which is, to me, mind-boggling. I mean, the circulation figures rival a magazine like Harper's or the New Republic, which probably has, 100 times the budget, 1,000 times the budget that we have. So the mode of communication online and the potential distribution is vast. And it's an enterprise that I still am very deeply committed to. Now, the one thing that we have started doing, I'll just show you quickly, is we did start publishing a couple of books. And so I'll just show you the first two books that we published. We published a collection of poems by the late Indian-American poet Ritika Vazirani, who, I don't know if your readers know her work. She was an extraordinary poet. She won the Barnard New Women's Poetry Prize, and her second book came out with Copper Canyon. When she died rather tragically, she took her own life and the life of her young son, actually, who was her son with the American poet Yusuf Kuminyaka, and left behind a manuscript that no one had really seen. And I think her publishing house just sat on it for years, and they didn't know what to do with it. And I was contacted by her estate to help revise it or edit it and bring it into publication. And the more we looked at this manuscript, and actually when we received it, it was very raw. It was not finished in any traditional sense. It had crossed out sections and edited handwriting on it and all kinds of things, but we found the work to be extraordinarily powerful, and we brought that out in 2010 as Drunken Boat's first book. Now, just this year, we brought out The Hide and Seek Muse, which is a book that's just come out. It's doing really quite well. It's a collection of essays by Lisa Russ Spar, who was she's a poet herself, but she was the poetry editor for the Chronicle of Higher Education. And every Monday she would take a contemporary poem and print it, but also give a short commentary about interpreting the poem and relating it to her life in some way. And there were wonderful little essays about the importance of poetry in everyday life. And they're smart and short little pieces, and we took a year's worth of those essays and we anthologized them in this book, Hide and Seek Muse. So the goal is, I think now, to continue publishing the magazine, but also to do maybe a book or two a year. Possibly we're thinking about a project where we do an audio CD. We have a lot of sound art that we've accumulated over the years, maybe to do a DVD. So editorially, that's something I want to continue to work on. But personally, I think finishing this book of poems and then making some headway with this memoir, I think will be really transformative for me.
Well, once again, thank you for sharing with us, Professor Ravi Shankar, for the wonderful works that you're doing. Can our viewers contact you for more information? Do you have a website for the Drunken Boat, especially, where they can locate you?
Absolutely. And anyone who's interested can send me an email at ravi@drunkenboat.com, RAVI @DRUNKENBOAT.com, and then you can always look at the website, drunkenboat.com. We have a blog that changes weekly. We have asked a number of contemporary writers to tell our readers about who they're reading and who they're excited about. And then the magazine, it comes out twice a year. So that would be a way to certainly get in touch with me, and I would be glad to get back in touch with any of your readers, any of your viewers.
Once again, thank you for joining us at the National Critics' Choice with Ravi Shankar and myself, Robin Stienberg. Have a good week ahead, and don't forget to stay tuned.